Some very shocking numbers were revealed today by CNBC that Big 12 fans should probably be concerned about. And these numbers also prove why the Big 12 conference, that the presidents of the Big 12 schools need to trust Brett Yormark. They need to let him cook and let him partner with private equity if he thinks that's the best thing to do. And we're going to talk about that in this live edition of Couz's Corner, which is brought to you by BetUS Online Sportsbook and Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. I have some data to show you guys, some numbers I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the article at CNBC. And the premise of this show is basically how valuable are college football programs or college football athletic departments overall. But we all know that football is about 75% of the overall value of an athletic department. So at the end of the day, it's how valuable are these programs, these athletic departments at these Power 4 schools, and even FBS schools actually is what we're talking about today. And we're going to get into that. But before we do, though, I have to give a shout out to one of my sponsors. I'll be right back. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. What is up? Thank you for joining this live edition of Couz's Corner. Come on in, make yourself at home, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out this shot of top shelf college football news and analysis. This episode is talking about the Big 12, why I, as a fan of a Big 12 team, am concerned about the future of the conference, why private equity might be the only option for this league if they want to continue to compete at the highest level, and why Brett Yormark probably wants to be the first one to jump into the water with the sharks that some people call sharks of private equity. I want to remind you, for those of you who might be new on live streams, you know how to join the conversation. If you want to make sure your comment gets read and seen, hit the $ right near the chat box where it says comment or say something. It'll highlight your comment. I'll read it. I'll acknowledge it as soon as I can. Obviously, VIP channel members who have badges beside their name will also get first dibs on comments. And if you want to support me for free, if you like what I do here, all you have to do is hit the thumbs up button on the video. That helps a lot too. If you're watching this on the replay, the thumbs up is also beneficial. Leaving comments also helps. Thank you for joining the show. I will get to comments as soon as I can, but I want to dive into this data, to this content here. CNBC put out an article today, and got to thank Jason Belzer. He was the one who tweeted this out. Jason Belzer is basically, I'll go ahead and read you his bio. He's the founder of Athlete NIL and at AD University. He's an attorney representing coaches, a professor of strategy and sports law at Rutgers, and the director of at Jewish Coaches. So he's really a big player, a big name in the NIL world, NIL landscape, and just in the university landscape as a whole. But he shared the article at CNBC, which basically talks about the valuation that was done on colleges and universities. And I'm going to go ahead and put the article on the screen for you. It says, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, see, major college sports programs collectively generating billions in revenue each year. Private investors are looking to get a piece of the action. How much is a college sports program worth? CNBC ranks the 75 most valuable college athletic programs. The rankings exclude military academies and are limited to schools that participate in the NCAA Football Bowl subdivision, or FBS, which tend to attract top players. He goes on to talk about who the highest programs are, how the SEC and Big Ten dominate, which I'll touch more on that later. And anyway, let's go ahead and get into the chart. As you can see here, let me try to make this bigger. As we get into this here, you'll see Ohio State's number one, $1.32 billion. There are only 4 universities that exceed the $1 billion mark. They're Ohio State, Texas, Texas A&M, and then Michigan. And then you got Alabama at 5, Notre Dame at 6, Georgia at 7, Nebraska at 8, Tennessee at 9, Oklahoma 10, on down the list. What's concerning to me as the fan of a Big 12 team, as you go down this list, you do not get to a Big 12 team until you get to number 33 on this list, and that's Texas Tech University, who has a valuation of $619 million. 33, you have to go through 32 other schools before you get to a Big 12 school. You have to go through several ACC schools before you even get to a Big 12 school. Now, where does my school, West Virginia, fall on this list? Well, you have to go way further down the list. Number 60, an estimated worth of $403 million. It's not very good compared to all the schools that they're trying to compete with. Now, some of this number beside it is their overall athletic revenue. They somewhat correlate, but it's not a 100% total correlation. They look at other things. They look at basically the whole package. They look at NIL. They look at your what conference you're in and your media revenue. They look at everything. They look at the number of alumni you have. They look at your overall valuation. They're looking at pretty much all the different numbers, data, metrics that make up a valuation. And Jason Belzer, is my understanding, he's the one who provided the data for CNBC to do this ranking. But West Virginia University is 60th out of a list of top 75 schools. There's even one Big 12 school who didn't even make the top 75, the Houston Cougars. So the Big 12's overall valuation, not very good. As a matter of fact, when you do the conference breakdown, SEC is worth $13.3 billion, an average of $832 million per school, followed by the Big 10 at $13.2 billion, an average of $734 million per school. ACC at $9.6 billion, $562 million per school, and the Big 12 at $6.7 billion, or $420 million per school. So the Big 12 falls way behind the other three. And of course, the SEC and the Big 10 are well ahead of even the ACC. So not a big surprise, right? We know the Big 10 and the SEC have those humongous media deals that they're currently under. And then the ACC's deal is next in line, and then the Big 12. And then also, when you look at the overall average per school, Clemson is actually in the top 20. They're the only ACC school in the top 20. If you don't, I'm counting Notre Dame as an independent here, but Clemson is in the top 20. They're the only ACC school out inside it. Then Florida State's also up there. It's fairly high on the list too. Stanford's pretty high on the list. When you put those schools on there, of course, the average is going to be higher. When you have to get through 32 other teams before you get to a Big 12 school, then the overall average is not going to be good. Now, some of these schools are obviously going to be on the uptick. The schools who used to be Group of Five, the Cincinnatis, the UCFs, the Houstons, the SMUs, they're obviously going to gain value over time because they're just now getting into a power league. Colorado's obviously probably going to be more valuable going forward, especially if Deion stays for several years. So I would expect some of these schools' valuations to change. Not sure what that'll mean for West Virginia. Can West Virginia change their valuation over time? I'll talk more a little bit about that later in the show. Right now, I want to focus on the conference as a whole, and then I'll get into the West Virginia piece, my thoughts on the West Virginia piece a little later. But I just want to share that with you guys. And now let's look at the overall data that I put together. I took the numbers that were provided here, and what I did, I'm doing a side-by-side comparison of the Big 12 to the ACC, and I also have some notes that I jotted down that I'll go over with you, just some takeaways that I came away with as I was putting together this list, or this spreadsheet, rather. Let me see if I can do a screen share here. Minimize. I got to minimize my screen first. There we go. All right, here we go. Let me see what that looks like. Make sure you guys can read it. All right. When you look at the Big 12 valuations, obviously here's the list of schools in order. You have Texas Tech at 1, worth $619 million. Kansas 2, $553 million. TCU 3 at $542 million. Arizona 4, $532 million. Baylor 5, Oklahoma State 6, Iowa State 7, Colorado 8, Utah 9, Kansas State 10, West Virginia there at number 11, BYU at 12, Arizona State 13, Cincinnati 14, UCF 15, and Houston 16. And because they weren't top 75, their numbers did not even show up on the list in the article. So not sure what their numbers are, and I didn't take time to go find their revenue on Sportico or Night Commission or other places. So there's the breakdown of the Big 12. As you can see, obviously West Virginia, my team, way down here near the bottom. Only schools they're ahead of are the 4 new schools and then Arizona State, who should move up this list. You know, it's been documented the issues they had financially in their athletic department. That should change and improve, especially now that they're in the Big 12. Now, let's go over and look at, you know, there's kind of a debate between Big 12 fans, ACC fans on which conference is better, right? I think, and look, I'm a Big 12 guy, and I do think the Big 12 is disrespected a lot. I think they get overlooked. I think the quality of their football teams and their basketball teams are overlooked. But when it comes to brand value, I don't think there's even an argument that the ACC is a better league overall, mainly because you have teams like Florida State, Clemson, Miami in that conference. It's hard to argue the value of those teams. And I think this right here is going to prove this. When you put the Big 12 and the ACC, or when you put the ACC up here, I put Texas Tech, who was the top team in the Big 12, over on the side, just to show you where they would stack up in the ACC. And then I put West Virginia, my team, because I know that a lot of you are West Virginia fans watching. I showed where West Virginia would land in the ACC. Not good. Not good. But anyways, you see the ACC, Clemson would be number 1 at $800 million. Again, they would be 18th out of the top 20 teams. Stanford, surprisingly, came in at number 2 with a value of $687 million. Florida State 3, Duke 4. That surprised me too. I did not expect to see Duke that high because, like I mentioned, the value of football is usually more than the value of basketball. But I think Duke's basketball brand is so large that it moves in. They're making a lot more revenue in basketball than most other schools. You've got Miami at 5, Louisville at 6, North Carolina at 7. I thought they would be higher, to be honest. We've got Pitt at 8, Virginia at 9, Georgia Tech 10, Syracuse 11, NC State 12, Virginia Tech 13, Boston College 14, Cal 15, Wake Forest 16, and SMU at 17. Now, just to compare, how would the Big 12 stack up to the ACC? Well, just for a quick comparison, Texas Tech, who's the most valuable brand, private equity brand in the Big 12, at $619 million, would come in at about number 6 in the ACC, just below Miami, who was at $639 million. And again, and I don't know if I explained this clearly in the beginning, but these are private equity valuations. If private equity firms are looking at these conferences and the teams in these conferences, these are the numbers they're going to come up with. That's what they would find these schools to be worth, more than likely, or somewhere in the neighborhood of these numbers. So Texas Tech would be 5th, they would be 6th in the ACC. Again, behind Clemson, Stanford, Florida State, Duke, and Miami. Just above Louisville. West Virginia, on the other hand, would fall if you insert them in the ACC and take Texas Tech out. West Virginia would fall just below Boston College at number 15 in the ACC, ahead of only 3 teams: California, Wake Forest, and SMU. So again, not a great spot for West Virginia. And not a great look for the Big 12 as a whole. This is exactly the reason that Brett Yormark, in my opinion, wants to go out and do a private equity deal before any of the other leagues do one, because he can be first to the table to do this and increase the value of the Big 12, or at least get some cash flowing into the Big 12. The private equity firm could potentially help raise the value of the conference over time and bring in even more revenue, and hopefully help at least close that gap. Not completely close it, but at least narrow the gap with the SEC and the Big Ten. And they're getting some pushback. I was listening to Greg Flugar's show earlier, and hats off to him. He's the one who gave me the idea for this video. But I was listening to his show earlier, and, he was talking about that. Brett Yormark wants to do this more than likely. At least he's highly considering it, but he's getting a lot of pushback from some of the schools inside the Big 12. Now, there are schools in the Big 12, allegedly, that are pro private equity. West Virginia allegedly being one of those, according to Greg and his sources. Now, I don't think that's a big secret. President Gordon Gee is one of the people who was trying to get that college sports athletic league, or whatever it's called, college sports football league. He was trying to get that started with the help of private equity. He was on the board of that. So I don't think it's a secret that he's okay with private equity. Ren Baker has never ruled out using private equity. The problem is getting all 16 schools in the Big 12 on board is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. So do schools decide to start doing private equity on their own just to help close that gap? I've talked about that in previous videos when it comes to West Virginia. Maybe they're going to try to partner with private equity on their own and not wait on the Big 12 to do it. If the Big 12 is not willing to do it collectively, maybe schools start doing their own private equity deals individually. It'll be interesting to see how this private equity is going to come into college sports at some point. It's just a matter of when, not if, but when. How soon? And will it be at the conference level, or will it be at the individual school level first? It'll be very interesting. But this explains why Brett Yormark is wanting to do, potentially or allegedly wanting to do a deal with private equity. He understands this. He understands the Big 12 is way behind. They need a shot in the arm. How do you get a shot in the arm? You go find some cash. You go find some capital. You partner with people who know how to do business and know how to raise the value of your product. Investors, people who know business, people who know marketing, people who can help you find ways to create more value than you currently have. Let's face it. Again, I'm a fan of a Big 12 team. I love this conference. But let's be realistic. What marquee brand do you see in this league when you look at those schools? I don't see one. Do you see an Ohio State or an Alabama or a Texas or a Georgia or a Notre Dame or a Michigan? I don't see one. And the Big 12, we all talk about the parity in the league. Parity's not building brands. It's not building brands. In my opinion, the Big 12, maybe some people disagree with me, but I think the Big 12 needs to be in desperation mode here. And I think they need to do something, and pretty quickly, because the landscape is shifting underneath their feet as we speak. And if they don't want to get left behind, and if their schools want to compete at the highest level, they need cash, and they need to create more value, and they may need help to do it, because as you can see, their private equity value, and yes, you might say, well, Couz, if they're not that valuable, as individual schools, then why would you go out and do a deal right now? Again, to be the first one to the table to do it. You're still getting what did I say overall collectively? What, 600 and some or $6 billion or whatever of cash that could flow into the Big 12 right off the top. It was like 400 million per school or something like that. It came out to. Those schools could use that money to help them be more competitive in football. And if you're the first one to do it and you help narrow the gap down, then maybe then all of a sudden it becomes more self-sustaining over time. Right? But if you're not the first one to the table to do it, then you're getting left behind even more. You're already dead last in revenue. So why not do something to try to catch these other schools? Don't let them leave you further in the dust. So as a fan of a Big 12 team, this concerns me. It really does. Now, let's look at some of the notes I jotted down. And again, I'll get to your super chats here, your comments here in a minute. I do see some super chats coming in. And I promise you I will get to them. But let me go ahead and look at the notes I jotted down. Before we do that, though, I do have to give a quick shout out to my other sponsor. If you're looking for a brand new sports book, look no further than BetUS Online. Right now, on your very first deposit, you can get a 150% sign-up bonus with promo code YouTube150. Again, promo code YouTube150. Get you 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. You get 125% on your next 2 deposits, up to a grand total of $2,000. Please play responsibly if you do decide to play. And remember, you must be 18 years of age or older. And I'm going to throw this in. If you or anyone you know has a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER for help. All right. Thanks for being patient. Let me do some housekeeping. And remember, before I forget, we've got the college football playoffs coming up this weekend. If you want to get your bets in for those games and you're looking for a sports book, go to BetUS. All right. And don't forget promo code YouTube150. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Let me go over some of these notes that I had jotted down here. Number 1, Texas Tech, the most valuable Big 12 team, would be 14th in the SEC in overall private equity value. The only schools they would be ahead of are Missouri, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State. Again, let me repeat that. The most valuable brand in the Big 12, according to CNBC, would be 14th in the SEC. The second nugget or second note I have wrote down here is there would only be 4 Big 12 teams on the SEC in the top. If you threw Big 12 teams into the SEC of the 16 teams, there would only be 4 Big 12 teams make the list. That would be Texas Tech, Kansas, TCU, and Arizona. It's the only 4 Big 12 teams that would even be in the conversation in the SEC as far as value goes in the top 16. Third note, Texas Tech would be 14th also in the Big 10, above only Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, UCLA, and Rutgers. I'm going to repeat that. The highest, most valuable team in the Big 12, Texas Tech, would be the 14th most valuable brand in the Big 10, above only Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland, UCLA, and Rutgers. This is just reemphasizing how far ahead the Big 10 and SEC are. Texas Tech, I mentioned, they're 33rd overall. There are only 7 Big 12 teams in the top 50 on this list out of 75 teams, or 75 schools. There are only 7 Big 12 teams in the top 50. 9 of the top 10 teams are in the Power 2, with Notre Dame being the only exception. And as I mentioned earlier, 18 of the top 20 are in the P2, with Notre Dame and Clemson being the only exception, as Clemson comes in at number 18. Now, let's talk a little bit about West Virginia. I showed you where West Virginia would stack up in the ACC. West Virginia is 60th overall, as I also mentioned earlier. They are ahead of only 9 other Power 4 teams, Power 4 schools. They're ahead of BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, Arizona State, and Houston in the Big 12. And they would only be ahead of Cal, Wake Forest, and SMU in the ACC. So they would be ahead of only 3 ACC teams. Of those 9 they would be in front of, only 4 of those 9 were Group of 5 teams 2 years ago. And one of them, and one other, was an independent. The teams that would not be in that category would be Arizona State, Cal, and Wake Forest. Those are the only 3 teams that West Virginia would be ahead of who have been in the Power 4 more than 2 years. So not good company to have right there if you're West Virginia, right? This is why, as a West Virginia fan, I'm very concerned for my league and even more specifically for the team I cheer for. I am extremely concerned about the future of West Virginia. Now, I did a video the other day, and I'll try to link to it at the end if I remember to after this gets uploaded. But I did a video about, it looks like Rim Baker and West Virginia, the leadership is planning to go all in football and try to do everything they can to win. They're promising more money for assistant coaches. They're having to buy out Neil Brown and his staff. They're having to pay Rich Rodriguez. They're promising to be at or near, I don't want to say promise, but they're committed to being at or near the top in revenue sharing when it starts next year, potentially. And I in that video I talked about where's that money coming from. I listed a few things in the video, and it can't all come from donors. You have to have more avenues. Maybe private equity is the route they're looking to go. Maybe they have something they're working on behind the scenes with a private equity company, even if it's not at a conference level. And again, this is alleged. I don't have any proof that this is happening. This is just me reading the tea leaves and saying what if, basically. This is kind of a what if scenario, right? Maybe West Virginia is working behind the scenes to do a deal with private equity, or they're being extremely creative with how they're going to bring in more revenue. I don't know, but they apparently are finding money somewhere. Yes, they are allegedly going to get more help from boosters and donors, the Pat McAfee's of the world, the Ken Kendricks of the world. Yes, that's real, but there has to be more to the story, because again, it can't all be coming from donors, because they're going to lean on the donors more for the NIL piece of this thing. But they have to come up with even more money for all the other stuff, the in-house stuff, the revenue sharing, the facility upgrades, the staff payouts, all of that. And they're committed to all of it. So this would explain why West Virginia, and again, it makes sense that West Virginia, a team like West Virginia, who's near the bottom in revenue, near the bottom in value, why they would want to use private equity to give them that shot in the arm, that boost that they need to try to compete at the highest level, which Ren Baker has committed to doing. He has said multiple times, we are committed to competing in college athletics at the highest level. Well, it's hard to do that when you're the 60th most valuable brand in college sports, in the FBS. But if you get a partner with a private equity and you're worth, say, $400 million, you spread that out over 10 years, it's $40 million extra dollars a year. Maybe the private equity firm helps you increase your value even more by doing side deals over here with your merch or whatever it is. They figure out how to make even more revenue. Maybe you get up to $50 million a year in worth. All of a sudden, you add that to your TV revenue of about $30 million. All of a sudden, you're sitting at $80 million. You're competing with the Big Tens and the SECs, at least for a short time, until they turn around and do a private equity deal too. So again, even if they compete for a short time, you're at least narrowing that gap for that short time and keeping yourself afloat, keeping yourself at the big boy table, so to speak, in college athletics. So those are my thoughts. I know that was a long opening. That was a long monologue. And I now plan to get to the chats, and I apologize, but I needed to get through that and not distract myself. I was having a hard enough time focusing anyway. Not been sleeping a whole lot lately, so I'm having a hard time focusing. Let's look at the super chats real quick. I've got Big Dan T in the house. ACC equals crap, poop, whatever word you want to use. Thank you, Big Dan T. I know how he feels about the ACC. Not a fan. Big Dan T gifted 5 Couz's Corner memberships. Thank you, Big Dan T. If you were one of the people who received those memberships, please give Big Dan T a big thank you. Please be sure to take advantage of the early videos I release if you're a club level member. And if you're not a club level member, I will try my best to get you in on a shout out, a random shout out on a video. And I'll also try my best to get you your comments read if you put them in the chat. We've got Timbo in the house with a donation of $5. He says, Mark Lasry, former owner of the Bucks, says it's already happening. Here is his video. He has bids on 2 teams. You know, I actually saw that clip too, Timbo. Thank you for reminding me of that. It's already happening. There are already deals in the works, apparently, according to Mark. And look, Florida State, it's been reported that Florida State has been in talks with private equity for like a year now or more. So Florida State could be the first team to jump on board a private equity deal. Maybe West Virginia decides to do something similar. You know, West Virginia has a new president coming in next year, so they may not can do anything until they get that new president seated, right? Because they're going to have to be brought in the loop of what's going on, and we'll probably have to approve it. But it'll be interesting to see if West Virginia. Greg Flugar reported that West Virginia is allegedly pro private equity at the conference level. No reports as to whether or not they would do it at the individual school level. But the money has to be coming from somewhere that they're committing here to this Rich Rod era at West Virginia. Timbo with another donation. Thank you, Timbo. He says, fantastic topic, Couz. Glad you were discussing this. West Virginia fans need to realize how far behind we are in the big picture. We talked about this some time ago. We did. And, you know, I'll take up for West Virginia a lot. We're the 15th winningest program of all time. The winningest team to not win a national title. They've won, you know, West Virginia has won multiple conference championships, multiple BCS bowls, multiple New Year's Six bowls. They now have had 14 consensus All-Americans. Congrats to Wyatt Milam, by the way, for being number 14. That came out today officially. So they've had they put a lot of guys in the NFL, you know, guys like, you know, right now you got Geno Smith. Obviously Chuck Howley, the Hall of Famer, was in the NFL. There's been a lot. Darryl Talley's one that comes to mind. But a lot of guys, Pac-Man Jones, Chris Henry, a lot of guys in the pros, Mark Bulger, Jeff Hostetler. I could go on and on. My point being, West Virginia is a good brand. But there are so many things that work against West Virginia. Some of it is out of their control. You know, population of the state hurts them. The fact that it's a poor state hurts them. The academics probably hurts them a little bit as far as brand value. I'm sure that matters here because we are talking about colleges here. These are schools. These are not, you know, for-profit businesses. A lot of these things work against West Virginia. Now, there are things, though, that West Virginia probably over the years has done to mismanage the school and the athletic department. I don't think it's, you know, it's pretty obvious, right? They're $144 million in debt. That can't help this valuation either. They've not done enough to increase revenue. They should have built more premium suites years ago. The fact that they don't have enough premium suites, premium seating to raise money is ludicrous. They have the least amount of premium seats in the Big 12. That's not acceptable. If you're a visiting fan and you visit Milam Mushkar Stadium in a game, look how small the press box is. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing how small the press box is. In the press box, usually underneath the press box, what do you have? Premium seating. West Virginia has very little of that. There's just so many things that West Virginia has not done over the years. They probably could have done differently. And I'm no expert on this, but there's a lot of things they could have done differently to be raising revenue that they have not tapped into. That's why they brought Ren Baker in to try to fix that. Hopefully it's not too late. Hopefully it's not, but as a West Virginia fan, I'm extremely concerned about my team and about our conference. Now, one comment I made when I was watching Greg's show earlier is you've got some ACC teams that apparently are on board with private equity, allegedly. You've allegedly got some Big 12 teams who are on board with private equity, and they're getting pushback from members of their leagues. Maybe those teams that are pro-private equity band together and go form their own friggin' league and say, screw this, man. We've got to do something. We got to do something to stay competitive. Maybe that's what the Magnificent Seven is looking to do in the ACC, along with teams maybe like a Duke or a Syracuse or a Louisville, whoever. Maybe they can use private equity. Maybe they can dissolve the ACC and those nine or 10 teams, whatever it is, all go form their own league. I've talked about that in videos before. And they use private equity to do it. If you've got Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Duke, Louisville, Miami, NC State, Syracuse, he'll throw in West Virginia and one or two others. If you've got a conference with those schools in it, what if Notre Dame does it? Think about that. If Notre Dame decides to get in on it and gets in on a private equity deal and joins that new league, then it would really boost the value. That would be a very valuable league. You'd have a lot of great rivalries. Virginia Tech and Virginia, I left them out of the Magnificent Seven. You get those 10 teams in a conference or 11 teams, whatever it comes out to in a conference. And heck, even if West Virginia's not part of it, even if it's just those 10 ACC schools, if you drop Wake Forest, SMU, Stanford's valuable, but according to Greg, they would not be part of a new league. But if you drop Wake Forest, if you drop Georgia Tech, if you drop SMU, if you drop Cal, you drop the least valuable teams in the conference, go form your own conference. You have less mouths to feed. You have valuable brands like Clemson, Florida State, top 20, top 25 or 30 brands. In Clemson's case, a top 20 brand. If you throw Notre Dame in there, a top 10 brand, that would be a very valuable conference. And if you get a private equity firm that's willing to invest in it, you might make more money than you would under the current ACC deal. So something to think about. Let me go into the chat here and see what you guys have to say. If you're watching on X, be sure to come over to my YouTube channel afterwards and subscribe over there to make sure you check out past episodes, whether they be live streams, whether they be the pre-recorded videos that I do. I've been talking a lot lately about the West Virginia coaching situation, obviously with Rich Rod coming in. And the next thing we'll be talking about likely is, his staff. What staff is he going to hire? Some news did come out on that today. Looks like Blaine Stewart, the tight ends coach, son of the late, great Bill Stewart, is the only coach that he's going to keep. So Chad Scott, gone. Shadon Brown, gone. Jeff Coons, gone. Matt Moore, gone. So not really a shocker, but that was reported today in Football Scoop before I got on here earlier. See. Got Big Dan T in the house. He says, I think it's already in the works, as already happening somewhat. Mark, you can go catch a show on the replay. Anytime we do live streams, which I know you guys like to get in the chat and participate, but you can always catch the shows after the fact too. Timbo, what's up, man? Thank you for hopping in. Thanks for being a VIP member along with Big Dan T. Says Couz, I told you some time ago this was coming. You're going to have two super conferences consisting of Big Ten and SEC, owned by the billionaires, and the rest will be group of fives. And I made a comment out of frustration during Greg Flugar's show earlier that said, look, if West Virginia either needs to partner with private equity and do a private equity deal, or they need to just drop down to group of five and say, forget it. Now, I don't want that to happen, obviously, but something's got to give at some point, Daniel Gigax in the house says, hi, Couz. What's up, Daniel? As you see, Daniel has a wrench beside his name. That means he's a moderator, or as I like to call him here at Couz's Corner, a bouncer. Anybody gets unruly, he can throw you out. He'll grab you by the collar and throw you out the door. Thanks, Daniel, for doing that, brother. Big Dan T says, what kills me is the damn ACC is crap in football. SMU came in and dominated it. That's how bad they are as a conference, yet they have all this money. Yeah, and look, they're still way behind the Big Ten and SEC, but it's gotten to where wins and losses don't matter as much anymore. And when it comes to these types of conversations, brand value, all that kind of stuff. And again, West Virginia is in such a disadvantage because of the state they're in, the low population, low economic status, lower number of alumni than a lot of the other schools, not as many big donors. So it's just, a lot of things working against them. Some of it they can control, some of it they can't. They are trying to fix the things they can control, but man, let's just hope it's not too late. Mike Joseph has been kept, Curtis. That's great to hear. I had not heard that. I did hear the Blaine Stewart one, but I did not hear the Mike Joseph one, but I'll be interested to see if Mike Joseph stays. I think you'll see, I think they'll retain more guys if Mike Joseph stays, because he might be the most well-respected member of that entire staff. And Daniel Gigax is confirming it. That's awesome. How in the heck is Stanford above anyone? They do not matter to the Bay Area. I know, Daniel, isn't it crazy? I guess Stanford sports is more valuable than we thought, right? What's up, John Christophic? It's not okay golf in the house. It's not okay golf. I'm going to read this comment. He says, Couz, you are not going to bring in outsiders who do not understand college sports and then magically increase the value. They will ruin it with the same approach. And it's a risk. It's not okay golf. It's definitely a risk, man. But hopefully what these commissioners and or presidents or ADs will do is say, look, let's find the right. For example, Weatherford Capital. Drew Weatherford, the former quarterback at Florida State, is an investor. He owns a private capital or private equity firm, or at least part owner in one. He's going to know football. So I'm sure there are investors out there who know football. And maybe remember, they would likely only be part owners of the athletic department or whatever arm of the athletic department they would create. They wouldn't have to be majority owners. So you would still have members of the administration helping them make these decisions. It wouldn't be a dictatorship or a one-man show. It would be a team effort. So to me, that's not a huge concern. And I know there's a lot of bad experiences with private equity. I've seen it in my own career, what I do for a living. I've seen it. But not all private equity is bad, or there wouldn't be so many of them out there. But I do get the concern, and it definitely is a risk. But at this point, what do you have to lose? Breaking news: West Virginia quarterback has entered in the NFL as a wide receiver. What? Interesting. Are you kidding, Chiefs fan, or is that real? I'm obviously missing some news while I'm on here. Daniel Gigax says, counterpoint, Couz, the issue West Virginia and private equity is that all the collateral is state-owned. What if things don't work as expected? Will a Sixth Street Capital own Mountaineer Field? That's a great question, Daniel. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to answer that. It's way above my pay grade. But what they can do is say they turn the part of the athletic department that handles the merchandising, for example. They can turn that into a private corporation, is my understanding. And then that private corporation can partner with private equity. And it may not affect the rest of the athletic department. You wouldn't necessarily have to turn the entire athletic department into a private entity. And I don't even think you can, because of your point, it's state owned, right? So I'm not sure you can turn, but you can take pieces of it, like I mentioned, just as an example, the merchandising side, which West Virginia does really well in. They're top 25 in the country most years in merch sales. It's something they really do well in. So that might be something they could use to privatize and partner with a private equity firm on. But that's a great point. You might have to sell a lot. You're going to have to sell something, right? So it'll be interesting to see, if they do something like that. It'll be interesting to see what they do, if they do it. And again, it's all a big if here. It's all theoretical. It's just kind of me kind of reading the tea leaves here. Couz says if Tech was in the SEC, they would be receiving SEC. I get that, David, but I'm just looking at today's real value. That's where they would be. So it's a fair point, and I probably didn't explain myself really, really clear. But as it sits today, they would be 14th. Using today's TV revenue, today's value, they would be 14th in the SEC. So, but it's a fair critique. Garrett Green has entered the NFL draft as a wide receiver. Me versus Echo Chamber. Thank you. I remember seeing you in the Greg Flugar chat. Thank you for this. Mick Stevens in the house. So it looks like Kansas Tech and TCU are pretty much in a league by themselves. They are. They kind of stand above the rest of the Big 12 for sure. You can take these conferences as well and break them into tiers. Texas Tech, Timbo says Texas Tech is going to the SEC soon. Kansas and Arizona, the Big Ten, as the two super conferences do their final expansion. Yeah, I was always held out hope that somehow West Virginia could eventually get into the SEC, because they almost did once before. But man, when you look at these valuations, I don't see how in the world that I don't even know that the ACC would want to take West Virginia with these kind of numbers. Again, it's another reason Rim Baker and the West Virginia leadership has to do something to increase the value of that brand. Because if you don't, you're not going to be attractive if there ever is a chance to get into one of the power leagues, one of the power 2 leagues. They're not going to do it when you're sitting there at $403 million behind Rutgers, for crying out loud. Timbo says the billionaires like Kendrick is not going to put more money in NIL that he doesn't get a write-off on. Well, maybe not. Me versus Echo Chamber says, great show, Couz. I'm not a WV fan, but love your passion for your team. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Tim Both also thinks TCU will eventually go to the SEC. It's very possible. I'm just I was surprised to see TCU up there. I was surprised to see Iowa State ahead of West Virginia on that list. I was surprised to see Texas Tech at number one. I'm not surprised to see Texas Tech near the top, but at the top, I was kind of surprised. Daniel Gigax says the question is, where does the university part start and where does the athletic start? That's getting muddied every day, Daniel. That's part of the issue right now with college athletics is the lines are being blurred between professionalism and amateurism. Check your DM on FSU. I don't have my phone with me, Daniel, so let me pull it up on my computer here. Okay. Daniel Libet, who is uncovering sports stories at Sportico. Okay, so Daniel Libet with Sportico says, if you're wondering why you haven't heard for a while about Florida State's Project Osceola, the first known private equity pitch to a college athletic department, it's because it has been dead for a while, as confirmed by @Novi Williams. Interesting. Interesting. I'm gonna have to get into that and read that. I don't want to do it right now, but Daniel, I really appreciate you. So that Project Osceola deal with Florida State is dead. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Daniel. Russell says we've created a professional sports system where the athletes have no contractual obligation to honor their commitment. That's a fair point, man. Something that just came to my mind about the Big 12 that I meant to mention. It may also explain why Brett Yormark is trying so hard to continue to expand the league. Even though UConn was in the top 75, by the way, they were near the bottom. But if you continue to add, you're adding more shelf space or more inventory, so to speak, for potential TV partners, for the any potential private equity investors. You're adding more and more inventory for them to utilize, and I'm sure investors would like to be in the Northeast market near New York to take advantage of that area up there. So adding a team like UConn would help that. Again, I don't know how valuable they would be, but Yormark I think we're at a point now where the presidents, and I'm not saying Yormark needs to go unchecked by any means, but I think they need to really, really trust him and let him move forward with some of these things he's wanting to do, because I think he is very forward thinking. I think he has all the right connections and contacts in the industry. And I don't think they have anything to lose at this point, to be honest with you. So I just think they need to let Brett Yormark do his thing. Timbo says that won't happen. Couz, they are going to go into the Big Ten and SEC. That is where the CFP is headed, as Monday Night Football in West Virginia. Those left out may form a new conference, but it'll be more or less a group of five. Yeah, and Timbo, that's definitely something that could happen. And look, I've talked to some other people about this. If West Virginia ended up in a league with teams like, basically, let's just take the ACC and the Big 12, okay? Let's say they end up having to do their own thing. I'm not saying they merge and form their own conference, but they have their own playoff, so to speak, their own championship. Let's say Florida State, Clemson, I don't know, your top 3 or 4 brands out of the ACC leave, right? And then you have the rest of the teams basically do their own thing. There would be no shame in winning that championship. You're beating 30 some of your 30, 32, 34 of your peers, and you're a champion of that league, of that division, that conference, whatever you'd call it. There would be nothing wrong with that. That's what professional sports does. You have teams who are fairly even playing each other every year. You don't have the uneven. They have salary caps and all this to try to keep parity. There's no parity in college sports now, at least not when you're comparing the SEC and Big Ten to everybody else. There's no parity. There's parity within conferences, We saw that this year. The SEC had more parity. Big Ten had more parity than usual. Look at, with Indiana in the playoff. Michigan not being as good as they have been. We obviously saw the parity in the Big 12 where they just beat each other up. But there's no parity when you compare conferences. That's the issue. So it could definitely come to that at some point. Curtis, thank you for that info, man. It says Garrett Green has declared for the draft as a wide receiver. That's interesting. And Daniel says he thought merch was already privatized. And maybe it is, Daniel. If it is, I apologize. I didn't know it. I was just using that as an example. Something I'll have to research, brother. Big Dan T says it would be nice to see Trump buying WWE, but then we would have to paint the stadium gold. Yeah, I don't want it gold. I like the old gold, not Trump gold. Timbo with a super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Timbo. He says, behind Harvard and Yale is Stanford as the richest schools in the country. That is why Stanford matters. Absolutely. They have enough in academic endowment money. They don't really even need all this athletic money, to be honest with you. Let me see, make sure I didn't miss a super chat here. Damon Tillman in the house with a $10 donation. Damon says, what's up, Couz? As it stands now, and I'm glad, we need to get behind Rich and Wren. Hold the rope. Apparently, Rich didn't like what was displayed by the coaches during the game. Keep the faith. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting him to keep many guys on staff. I mean, Rich is going to want to bring guys who share his philosophy, share his vision. Maybe, offensively needs to share his offensive philosophy. He has a defensive philosophy he wants his defensive staff to have. So, it's different, right? He's got to build his own culture, and maybe those coaches just weren't a fit. It doesn't make them bad. Some of those assistant coaches I think are really good. Some of them not so much. But when it comes to building a culture, you need to make sure everybody's on the same page. And maybe that's what he's doing here. So I have no issue with it. And I'm not that surprised by it. I love Chad Scott. I thought he's a great coach. I think Matt Moore's a great coach. But, I trust Rich to bring in his own staff and the guys that he can work with and wants to work with. And Timbo says, I'm absolutely right about Brett. Yeah, Brett is going to know more about corporate America. And it's even in the sports space, especially because that's where he spent almost his entire career. He's going to know more about that world than any college president, more than likely, or any college AD, more than likely. Now, they can work together on it, obviously, but let him do what you hired him to do. That's what you brought him in for. He got you the four corner schools. He got you the TV deal ahead of the Pac-12. Let him cook. Let him do his thing. I'm all for that. And if it means you got to go bring in Connecticut, then go bring in Connecticut. I have no issue with that. Thunder OU Sooner says, what's the rumor about Zach Alley? It looks like Thunder OU Sooner. The scuttlebutt now is that it's going to be Jeremiah Johnson, the defensive coordinator from Louisiana Tech, that gets the nod as West Virginia's next DC. But we will see. There's been no official announcement, at least not as of yet. Big Dan T in the house says, Farmer, Donaldson, and 2 O linemen are in the portal. Sucks, but we need to start bringing in guys. Losing a lot, which is expected. It is expected, and I hope they can start bringing guys in as fast as guys are leaving. But, Coach Rod I'm sure he has a plan. I'm sure he's relayed that plan to Ren Baker, and I'm sure they're going to let it. We went through the same thing in basketball. We were getting anxious and impatient. It took him a while to get his staff together, and the basketball team so far looks like they're hitting on all cylinders. So let's hope Rich Rod can do the same thing. Now, it's a little different in football because you have to bring in 105 guys, and I'm talking about filling a roster here, not – he's probably going to have to bring in 30, 40 guys, just if I had to guess. So it's different than bringing in 10 or 11, right, like they do in basketball. Stormy Cyclone says this PE evaluation is definitely reality check. Absolutely it is, man. Absolutely it is. It's a smack to the face of reality is what it is. It's reality smacking us Big 12 and ACC people in the face. And heck, even if you look at the teams at the bottom of the SEC and Big 10, it's kind of a smack to the face. I mean, the Vanderbilts, the Mississippi, now they're sitting better than most Big 12 schools, but they're still not anywhere near the top of their leagues. So you can still see some relegation potentially down the road. You might see teams like Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Rutgers. You might see some of those teams get pushed out potentially at some point, and then they can join the rest of the Big 12 and the rest of the ACC in another league, I guess. Cold Country Podcast says we have to be one of the most recognizable logos on the planet. Branding is definitely there for us, but funding in the Big 12 is definitely a concern at the moment. Absolutely. Again, and I know a lot of people don't like the thought of private equity, but I'm just at the point now. I think, people say it reeks of desperation. I think you are desperate to a degree. Maybe you don't need to pull the trigger on it tomorrow necessarily, but I think in the next year or two, you probably need to seriously consider pulling the trigger on some private equity, if not sooner. The gap is going to continue to get further and further and further if you don't, between the Big Ten, the SEC, and you. And if you want to compete with those schools, if you want to have even a remote chance at a national championship, you've got to do it, in my opinion. All right. Well, I want to give another quick shout out to my sponsors, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, your personal injury and medical malpractice attorneys in West Virginia and Virginia. If you need their services, give them a call at 304-999-HURT or go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com, and Eric Buckner and his team will take care of you. Also want to give a shout out to BetUS Online, where you get 150% sign-on bonus on your first deposit with promo code YouTube150. Take advantage of that today. Thank them for helping keep the lights on. Also, you can go to couzescorner.com/shop. I have links to the Honored Athlete Trading Card Store. I have, and if you use that, I'll get a small commission. I have a link to my Fanatics shop where I get a small commission, and I have my own merch store. We can get yourself some Couzes Corner merch, get yourself some West Virginia versus the World merch, some the West Virginia Jack Daniels design. You can get that over there as well. At couzescorner.com/shop. We got some people chiming in here. We got John Park with the super chat. John, thank you. He says, exciting and challenging times for WVU football. Very cool to have Ren Baker and Rich Rod at the helm. I agree, John. I totally agree. I think those are the two guys we need. And look, this is something I meant to bring up earlier. I think this explains, and I know my guy Timbo is not a huge fan of the whole Pat McAfee thing and what happened the other day. But, and I know some people probably think it's a dog and pony show, but I'm telling you, in today's world, when you sit there in West Virginia 60th in brand value, if having West Virginia brand on the Pat McAfee show helps you add more brand value, then by gosh, you better do it. You've got to do everything you can within that's legal, obviously, to get that Flying WV brand as much value as possible. You have to. We've got Outlaw of College Football in the house. He says, let's face it, unless we get rules in place, all of college football is done within 10 years. And that is a concern, Outlaw. It's a definite concern. You've got guys now who may be able to – you already got guys who can transfer every year. They're going to be making millions and millions on NIL. Now there's rules out that they might have endless eligibility. Boy, won't that ruin college football. You'll have 30-year-old men playing college football. What an absolute clown show it's becoming. Daniel Gigak says the most recognizable brand for West Virginia is the song Country Roads. When you do karaoke in the middle of Russia and they know the words, you can't buy that brand value. And that's a great point, Daniel. It's a great point. Timbo again says, what is going wrong at West Virginia? We have one of the highest per home game costs per attendee. They're at the bottom of the Big 12. And that's fair. That's a fair concern, Timbo. Pat McAfee lives rent-free in Ryan Clark's head. Yes, they are into it. I haven't even been keeping up with that whole thing, but I did see where they were kind of in a Twitter spat back and forth. I guess Ryan Clark got his feelings hurt by something Pat McAfee said on a show. So some Twitter drama between celebrities. Well, what do you know, right? Well, listen, I'm going to jump off of here. Again, thanks to everyone for coming on. Thanks for your support. Again, please hit that like button for me on your way out. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you're watching on X, come over to YouTube. I did see that, Timbo, a player going into his 10th season. I did see that. Absolutely. It's bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Thanks again to my sponsors. Thanks again to all you watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Hope the rest of your day and or night is top shelf. Q Country Roads.